So the way that we are, our sort of order of the day today is that we will, after our opening prayer, we will start off with our Treasurer, Jonathan Gloster, who's going to walk us through the revenue section of the budget and all of the expense parts except for the diocesan staff section. So he'll be sort of jumping over that section when he gets to it. And then after he's done and we have some time for questions on those items, then we will be handing it back to Bishop French to walk us through the sort of realignment and restructuring plan for diocesan staff so that you can get a good idea of that, after which we'll go back and just do a brief run through of what that actually looks like in the budget document. And as I said, we'll be looking, taking questions at certain periods of time during that presentation when we hit good breaking points. So with that, again, I want to welcome you and thank you for being here on the Monday afternoon and for taking the time to help everyone else understand as well what we have in front of us as far as our budget document and the plan and the vision that lie behind it. So with that, Bishop French, I will turn it over to you for our opening prayer.
Thank you. And I want to echo what Canon Phyllis just said about gratitude for those of you who've taken time to be here. It's really appreciated. We want to make sure that as many people as possible learn about our budget hopes and dreams for 2024. And you setting aside your time is wonderful, and it will help the whole diocese to understand the budget more fully when we have people in many different congregations, as you all are representing the breadth and depth of the Diocese of New Jersey. For our opening prayer, I am going to use the prayer for the diocese, slightly amended from the Book of Common Prayer. So the Lord be with you. Let us pray.
And with you.
O God, by your grace you have called us in this diocese to a goodly fellowship of faith. Bless our clergy and lay leaders and all our people. Grant that your word may be truly preached and truly heard, your sacraments faithfully administered and faithfully received. By your Spirit, fashion our lives according to the example of your Son, and grant that we may show the power of your love to all among whom we live, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Alrighty, thank you so much, Jonathan. Would you like to get us started?
Okay, I will. Excuse my camera seems to be on auto off mode. Every time I turn it on, it just cuts itself off. So, but I will. Want to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon. Appreciate your time, as Bishop French said, coming in, getting an overview of our 2024 budget process and a preview of the budget that will be eventually presented at Convention on December 9th. First, I'd like to thank all the folks who've worked to help pull this budget together. Certainly Bishop French, she's joined us in several sessions, Phyllis Jones and other members of the diocesan staff, and especially the Diocesan Finance and Budget Committee. I see a few of our folks on this afternoon. We met multiple times over the last 3.5, 4 weeks, and even one day, twice a day, late into the evening. But really thank for all the effort that people have put together to put these numbers together this year. As you know, we've had a challenging last couple of years, and we've tried to do our best this year to sort of give the fairest budget possible given the constraints we have. So with that, I'm going to ask Phyllis if she could put up sort of the first part of our budget. A second here. Yeah, so we'll talk primarily about is the 2024 revised budget. This is our newly proposed budget for 2024. First, start on the income side. Line 1B on the income side is our projected March submission giving. This is the actual givings from our parish congregations. Last year we were at $2,815,799 is what we budgeted. This year we've budgeted a slight increase over that, $2,823,679. The the way we got to that number so far is we've taken in actual pledges returned by congregations through early October. And then if we didn't have that information yet, which some congregations are still turning in because the due date wasn't until mid to late October, we took what they pledged last year and just used that as a level number going across if we didn't get any response yet. This number may get adjusted as we go through and review all of the responses from our congregations to see what their actual numbers they plan on pledging for 2024. But right now, it's pretty much level between 2023 and 2024. No major increase is projected in March of Mission Giving. The other income line that we have is income from our diocesan trust funds. Those are the next two lines, lines 2 and 2A. These are income, dividends, and interest from those trust funds that are used to fund the operating deficit. It's not the operating deficit, the actual operating fund. Sorry about that. Last year we had budgeted 350 and 96,000, so basically close to $450,000 from our trust income from our trust funds. This isn't the principal, as I mentioned, just the income. This year we've reduced that amount of income down to 310 and 86,000. Main reason for that is, as many of you know, we had a high drawdown in 2023 of well over $1.3 million from our trust fund. And doing that, it reduced the actual shares that we have to draw interest and dividends from, so that we've reduced the amount that we project coming in on that down to that smaller number, which is about $396,000 for this year coming in. The other area of our income line we show is the trust grants. That's basically the drawdown from our trust funds, and that number really is arrived at based on once we go through all the expenses, whatever we have left, we fill the gap through drawdown from the trust funds. We don't have the option of selling treasury bonds or corporate bonds, so the only other way we can fill the deficit, unlike the federal government, is to draw down from our trust funds. You can see we're projecting this year a significant reduction in the total amount that was drawn down last year, which was combined for search and transition and regular ministry support was over $1.3 million. So we've worked hard to reduce that number, and you'll see how that number's been reduced through savings on the expense side. On our expenses, I'll go to the first two expense lines under diocesan priorities, lines 10 and 20. So line 10 is expenses from our basic support to our mission congregations. Finance and budget has set a target of $475,000 for that line this year. Last year, the budget number was close to $575,000. So you can see there's been a reduction in the amount budgeted for mission congregations. The Board of Missions is still in the process of evaluating requests from mission congregations and coming up with a final recommendation on expenses support for those mission congregations. And they're nearing the end of their process, but I see Paul Wolfgang is here with us this afternoon. I'm going to let him, if he has anything to add about the process and how they're coming along within the Board of Missions in terms of giving us a final number for mission congregation support.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. First of all, I see many people here some of them are actually members of the Board of Missions, but some of you may not be familiar with who the Board of Missions is or what their mission is. The Board of Missions consists of representatives from each of our convocations. There are two representatives, one clergy person, one lay person, and also ideally one of those two should also be from a mission congregation. And then there are appointees from diocesan council and from the bishop. The process is that in the summertime, the Board of Missions sends out to every mission church a request to fill out an annual report, and part of that annual report is the opportunity to ask for a mission grant. We've received mission grants totaling about $800,000 this year. We are in the process of evaluating those. Tomorrow evening, the Board of Missions will actually get together and start reviewing each of the applications. And then on Thursday, we'll continue that review and come up with our recommendation. Our goal is to keep within that $475,000 figure, ideally even to come in a little under it. But there may be implications associated with that, such as by denying a grant to a mission church that needs the money, but we can't afford to support for various reasons. That may mean that the future of that particular congregation is in question. But these are hard decisions that we have to make. We've received some guidance from our bishop, and it's my understanding Bishop French will be joining us tomorrow at 6:30 Eastern Daylight Saving Time, whatever time that is in England this time.
Okay, thank you, Paul. The next line item is line 20. You'll see we're proposing there a number of $300,000. As you'll notice, last year, that amount that we paid to the National Church was $581,425. That basically was the asking from the National Church for the Diocese of New Jersey. This year, their asking number was roughly $599,000. Given our financial situation and a need to reduce expenditures in the short term over the next 2 or 3 years, we're proposing to reduce our asking to $300,000 this year, increase that somewhat next year, maybe to $400,000, and then the $500,000, and then go back up to the full amount over a 3 or 4 year period as we address some of the dire needs of our expenses here in the Diocese of New Jersey. It's an unusual move, but we're told it has happened in the past. Bishop French, we've consulted with her quite a bit about that, and she definitely is going to be communicating with the National Church about the financial condition of the Diocese of New Jersey, and hence the reason for our request. And I'll let Bishop French add anything else she'd like to add on that subject.
Thank you, Jonathan. The National Church provides a process for dioceses to request relief in the assessment, but you have to demonstrate both need and a plan to improve the situation. With the amount that last year we took, we drew down our reserves and our endowments and our trust accounts by more than 1.3 million, and the year before that it was 900,000 or so. Which means our average is well over $1 million for the past couple of years. That level of drawdown is not sustainable, and among the many steps we're looking at taking, it does make sense that kind of relief is available from the National Church. It's not something we should do all of the time, but I think we're in a situation where it is an appropriate request. And as our treasurer mentioned, we're looking at a request of cutting it by half this year, so 300,000. 400 next, 500 the year after is my anticipation, and then back to full strength in 2027. I think that this is both necessary relief for us at this time, but it also allows us to have the conversations with our congregations about their marks of mission giving using a very similar approach. That we know not all of our congregations are able to give the full amount that is requested, but I think a process that engages people in asking for relief when it's needed, in demonstrating the financial realities that they are facing, and also in working with them to provide solutions and steps, a way forward that will allow congregations to become financially healthy again, just as we are working on for the diocese. So the process for that is that mid-month we let the National Church know what our number is, and then we provide them with some documentation, and hopefully we'll hear relatively shortly about the end result of that. But I think it's the right decision for this time, and I'm grateful for the work of our treasurer and budget and finance committee and having that conversation.
Great, thank you. Next, I'll go down to social and ethnic ministries, which is the next section of our budget, expense budget. In this area, and generally, we kept this in line with what those ministries have asked for. In some cases, there's been a slight increase, such as in the Anti-Racism Commission. Their budget was significantly below what they asked last year. There's some activities they'd like to accomplish in 2024. So there's a slight increase in their budget number. In most other cases, they're either around the same or slightly less into what the budget numbers were in 2023. Reparation Commission is a little bit less. That's still in keeping with what they asked in terms of their budget requests for 2023. And you can see a few other areas they're slightly less than what they were in 2023 and 2024. So the next area is youth and young adults and youth activities and young adult ministries. You'll see when we talked about the staff restructuring that there's been some changes there, but overall the program budget is at $30,000, a little bit less than what was asked last year. Those activities have been ramping up since the pandemic back in 2020, working towards more in-person events across the various diocesan convocations. This year, they're not going to spend the full $35,000, but we're looking at providing a budget of $30,000 for 2024, and a similar budget for young adult ministries as it was last year, just a slight decrease. Overall, and diocesan priorities, we're down about $400,000, about really $380,000, and you can see most of that comes in the area of the National Church, Episcopal Church payment, and a reduction in some of the support for mission ministries. Next area, congregational development in 2024. Big change you'll see in the budget for congregational development was $30,000 in 2023. We've got it at $10,000 in 2024. You'll see some changes that have been made in the way congregational development be done when Bishop French talks about the staff readjustments. But we did allow some program funds to support activities in congregational developments. But due to the projected change in structure of how that support is provided, we believe that budget will be sufficient to provide meaningful activities to support our congregations. Another area, pastoral response. This was formerly named Parish Crisis Response. Budgeted $15,000 in 2024. Luckily, so far this year, we haven't had any major expenses recorded in crisis response yet, but we did feel that there needed to be some funds in the budget. Change here that was cut from $1,500 to $7,500 in 2024 to help save on some of our expenses. Other areas of congregational ministries, stewardship ministries, lifelong Christian formation, Commission for Liturgy and Music, and all these other areas pretty much stayed the same as they were in 2023. A new line item, adult Christian formation. It's just a recognition is that we need to budget some to support not only youth formation, but adult Christian formation in there. So that line item of $3,000 was added. And as I said, we'll discuss more about Christian formation and congregational development as we get to the staff realignments. Going ministry development, Committee on the Priesthood left that budget the same. There's been sort of a pause while we look at the process of ordination to the priesthood, but the plan is that we'll pick back up in 2024 as activities for new priests continue in 2024. Our internship program, again, that's based on the number of priests we have in the process. Don't project any expenses in 2023, but we do expect as we resume the process toward ordination to the priesthood in 2024, we'll need some budget support internships, which we expect to pick up in 2024 as we come out of the pandemic area. There wasn't much spending in that area during the pandemic when lots of congregations were doing virtual services, hence we didn't have many expenses. Other areas for priest development are in And clergy days, kept that budget the same. Fresh Start and Transition Ministries are helping new parishers when they transition in new ministries into new ordained ministers and order primarily priests. Well, that's supporting those activities. So that's why we have budgets for those areas for 204A and 205 that support priests who are transitioning into new congregations. Next line item is for deacons, the School of Ministry, which has been a main area of training for deacons. Budget line item for that program expense is going to be about the same as it was in 2023. There were some extra expenses to support staff funded outside of our operating budget, and those will be discussed in the staff reconstructing how we deliver our services through the School of Ministry. Committee on a Deaconate and Deacon Council, pretty much flat year to year in their budget request. They requested slightly less, and then Finance and Budget agreed with that request. For the laity, we had the Ministry Institute, which provided some workshops and seminars for the laity. They haven't been fairly active the last couple of years, and at the request of the leader of that activity, we don't have a budget for 2024. It's hoped that some of the other areas, such as Christian formation and other activities, will cover some of the needs that were covered in the Ministry Institute in past years. Going down to the next area, diocese gatherings. The convention left that budget the same as it was in 2024. We will have a March convention, an in-person convention. It won't focus on budget, but we do have election of diocesan election to various diocese commissions and committees that will take place at the March convention. Clergy conference, leaving that budget flat and the same as lay leader conferences. Within the larger church, we incur costs for Lambeth in there. That's the same. House of Bishops, you'll see a slight increase in there, but as Bishop French mentioned, she's attending the College of Bishops in Canterbury, and as a new bishop, that's a request that all new bishops attend those sessions for first 3 years or so as they become for new bishops. So we budgeted money to support her activities at the College of Bishops, so that's why there's a slight increase for that, primarily in travel. One noted different significant change you'll see for General Convention, which is in 2024, we actually have no budget line item. We're able to achieve that and not have to budget funds for 2024 for two reasons. Primarily, we've been accruing expenses over the last 3 years for last year's General Convention, which originally was to take place in 2021, took place in 2022, did take place in 2023. However, it was in Baltimore, so our travel costs were significantly less than what they would have been if we were attending a general convention and sending a delegation further away. Also, in addition, that actual general convention last year was reduced in size and scope. Therefore, we had fewer days. The delegates were in person and the travel being less. So the money we had accrued for general convention in 2022, we're able to carry that over to cover a majority of the costs we projected in 2024. Thus, in 2024, analysis projected that we did not need to accrue or budget any additional new funds to cover expenses for general convention, which will be in Louisville, Kentucky this year. But we will be sending the same size delegation that's normally sent. Program and covenants, those will stay the same in most cases. The only real change are in companion diocese was budgeted for $12,000 in 2023. Look for a slight reduction in that in 2024, $9,500. And Episcopal Mental and Spiritual Health Ministry, you can see we haven't had any expenditures in that in the last year. They'll be looking at how to maybe restructure that to provide better support to our congregations and the diocese. But we did leave a budget of $1,000 to support Episcopal Mental and Spiritual Health Ministries in 2024. Now I'll jump over diocesan staff and go down to other diocesan expenditures. The main area, we call them diocesan obligations. One thing you'll see in 2024, we won't have any expenditures for search and transition, which we had for the last 2 years. So that saves $110,000 out of our budget in 2024 that we had spent in 2023. So that was a significant contribution to reducing the overall expenditures in that area. Under finance, insurance, bonding, audit, and legal, we left those budget line items the same as they were in 2023. Those go up and down based on situations going, but other than legal costs, we don't expect any major variances in those areas. In facilities, we analyze our facility cost through the current year, 2023, and made adjustments where we felt it was prudent. One area was a slight increase of $5,000 on the property maintenance. We had some extraordinary expenses this year, but given the property and the aging of property that we have at Dyson House, the significant amount of maintenance that's needed. We're also starting to see a few more activities in person. So the need is that we probably will need more money allocated in that area to cover projected upkeep on the Dyson properties in 2023. Another area that there's a slight change is in hospitality. You'll see that was at $6,000 2023. It's going up to $12,000 2024. And that primarily reflects the fact that we're having more in-person activities at Dyson House, getting close to a level they were prior to the pandemic in 2020. And the other area where there's an increase of about $8,300 is in the IT maintenance and support. This is to cover upgrades to our technology that's used to support our activities. It's not so much the physical equipment, but the services we use to support the web page hosting and a lot of the other services that are needed to support Dyson operations. So that number is at $60,000, a slight increase over what it was in 2023. Other areas in property area or facilities stayed the same. So overall, we're seeing a slight increase in facilities. Other areas of general obligations around retired clergy and widows and orphan health insurance, and also our retired clergy and widows orphans funds, those are going to stay level budget in 2024 as they were in 2023. So we don't see any project any major changes there. The bottom line, you'll see, I know we haven't covered the changes in the Dyson staff, but you'll see there's been we were able to achieve some reductions there when we go through it in detail. The key difference is our total outlays in 2023 were $4,584,998, a very significant expenditure area in terms of our budget. In 2024, we've come up with a projected expenditures of $3,954,861. So you see a significant reduction of about $600,000 in what was projected in 2023 in the budget for what we have in 2024. As I went through this, I showed you some of the key areas where we're looking at reductions, and given the fact that our income outside of drawdowns from trust fund is pretty even, we're still able to reduce that drawdown, that number of over $700,000. It's still extremely high drawdown from our trust funds, but we felt we're doing the best we can to keep that number in somewhat control in 2024. So I'll pause here for any specific questions on what I've talked about so far, and keep in mind we'll come back and go through actual details on the Dyson personnel. Bishop French will lead us through that discussion as he talks about the restructuring she's proposed.
If anybody has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or post them in the chat or let yourself be known.
Wow, it seems like we might have overwhelmed you with information. I'm tremendously proud of the work that the finance and budget folks are doing and have done, to get that 600,000 decrease in spending, even knowing that some of it is coming from our request for relief from the National Church in a time when costs are going up and our income levels are going down and costs for congregations and needs are going up. That's tremendous work. So I'm grateful for it.
So I did see one question in the chat about the legal fees being higher than expected for 2023. And that was sort of a combination of mostly disciplinary matters in some of our congregations that required investigative fees on some to some parts of that. Yes, Bishop.
We have a quirky thing in our canons. It's one of those things that when I share it with other bishops, they're always very surprised. We actually pay coverage for legal fees to a not insignificant number in some situations for respondents, those who have been found to be that the accusations against them have been found to be grounded. And the number that's in our canons, it's Canon 68, is $30,000 per situation. It is my hope that in the spring, when we do the canonical revisions, that we will diminish that particular obligation, while of course wanting to acknowledge our desire to support all our people, and especially to support anyone who has suffered as a result of misconduct, but also to provide fair, transparent, and just processes for people. But that, because we have some obligations related to some of our canonical quirks, we do have some fees related to that as well. My hope is that that is not a long-term pattern for us going forward, but to be aware that that's where some of those changes come from.
Yep. And that's something that we are looking forward to changing. At the same time, you know, as long as disciplinary matters exist, we will still have some of our own expenses that we do need to cover. And so that does come up, and, you know, it's really difficult to, you know, just to know when it's going to be what in any particular year. So one of the other things that I would, one of the other things that I would actually lift up at the same time, though, is that we are tremendously blessed with Paul Ambos as our chancellor, because for most of the what you might call routine legal advice that happens that a bishop needs to be supported in her role, he does it at no charge to us. And it's just an amazing ministry that he has. And I'm just, you know, day after day, very grateful for him. So.
Thanks. I think Paul is the exception to the rule. You get what you pay for. He's actually really good at this work as well. So I'm very grateful. At one point in the first couple of months of my time as your bishop, I had him on speed dial every morning at 8:45. So.
And I did see also a question regarding, you know, noting that the reduction in the drawdown from the trust, which is actually more like $600,000, about half of that this year does come from the reduction in payments to the Episcopal Church, which is indeed temporary. And what we're really trying to do is we are continuing to work with you know, different avenues of replenishing our trust funds, for one, to help be able to have more dividend revenue that will come from the trust funds to help support our budget. We're also working with all of our congregations on the marks of mission giving, which provide, you know, far and away the largest portion of the funding that supports our operating budget. And so there, as with every congregation's situation, you know, we all got hit hard by COVID. And so we're still, to a certain extent, experiencing, you know, some of the ramifications of that. But even before COVID, you know, we had some real challenges with what we used to call our fair share giving process, and we now call our marks of mission giving process. We, right before COVID, had instituted, and again, this is canonical, a board of consultation for congregations who, for whatever reason, were struggling with making the full ask. Not so that we can beat people on the head, but so that we can find what are the ways that we can better support congregations, whether it's stewardship practices, whatever it might be, to be able to improve their own vitality and viability in ways not just financial but spiritual as well, because we all know money follows mission. And so if we have spiritually healthy congregations and mission-oriented congregations, that does tend to translate itself into healthier finances as well. So that's what was envisioned. So yes, that's a very long-term outlook, but it's also a part of how we, that along with, again, replenishing our own trust funds are some of the ways that we're looking to have our revenue come, meet our expense levels.
We've also got to talk in the next year about some sort of fundraising support. If we could raise more money ourselves, we would have. I think every congregation would agree that if they could do that themselves, they would have. There's things you can do to make slight increases, but in terms of a significant change, this diocese is under-resourced for the size of diocese, for the number of congregations and the ministries that we have. So part of our plan for next year is to begin the process of gathering the information so that we can work with development folks to move forward, increasing our income as well as decreasing our expenditures. It's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah. And with that, I think that's the last one that I saw. So I think, Bishop French, we are ready to move into the staff realignment conversation.
Thank you. Would you be so kind as to share the short table that we've produced? Wonderful. And if you could scroll down so we could see the bottom. I'm not sure everyone can see that.
That is.
Is it showing? Okay.
Yeah, that is.
Okay, there it is. If you've got your screen maximized, it works. If you don't, it doesn't. Okay, that's perfect. Okay. I'm going to just describe the vision for staffing for 2024, and I'm going to begin at the bottom of the list. You'll notice that it looks like the very bottom is the number that shows what we estimate is the reduction in staff position costs of 113,000. That is a little bit deceptive because one of the things that we have done, I'm committed to diminishing our financial obligations at this point, while also expanding staffing and support for our congregations, because it's clear that there are needs in our diocese, that diocesan staff can be catalysts for engagement of renewed or new mission initiatives, and various places where our congregations would benefit from a greater level of support from the diocese and from diocesan staff. So with that in mind, one of the things that this budget does reflect, even with that decrease, the net estimated reduction, is it reflects the fact that we've had some positions that were funded. There were diocesan staff positions, but they didn't appear on our diocesan operating budget. And they were funded in a few ways that were slightly irregular, off the budget, so to speak. This brings all of our staff positions together in one place, and it creates space for the ministries to take place and for people to be seen as full members of the staff. A good example, and we'll talk about this in just a moment, is the School for Ministry position, which has been funded very generously by the trustees, but has functioned somewhat as a diocesan position, while not appearing in the budget in quite the same way, although some of the costs did appear in the budget. We'll see when we get further up on this list where that might be, but just know that some of the increases in positions there's nothing here that's really a brand new area of mission and ministry we haven't been doing. It reflects moving people into the diocesan staff listing in a way that is perhaps a little more transparent for people. It also reflects lifting up some areas of mission and ministry so people can see the resources and the staff support more clearly. But even with this moving around of positions, we've still managed a net reduction of almost $115,000, $113,438. In this estimate. When we add in a small cost of living increase, we were calculating at 3.2% for staff, in recognition of the fact that there was no cost of living increase in 2022, the year when I think the number that was recommended for clergy was 5% in this diocese, and the number that the IRS said was actually the national figure was over 8%. The fact that diocesan staff haven't had any increase this year seems like an appropriate time to do that where possible. So let's dive into the positions, and you'll see and hear a little bit about each of them. And I hope you'll have lots of questions. I'd be delighted to tell you about this. I think it represents a really good way forward that both consolidates our financial picture while strengthening our offerings. I'm going to talk first about the archivist. We have an archivist, Canon Richard Reed. He is, it's a very small position. It is a small stipend that is offered. He comes in a day a week and works incredibly hard to do this very specific and highly trained skill, the archival responsibilities of the diocese. And that is not a small thing, because it is part of our canonical obligations to our congregations and our national church, that we are charged with keeping and holding the records for events, for places, for conventions, for clergy, and all kinds of different ways our archivist has a role in holding our records. As we get smaller as a diocese and congregations close or are diminished in their own capacity to care for their records, then those come to us, and the archivist has responsibility for caring for them on their behalf and on behalf of all of us. So that position, in a time when some of our congregations are getting smaller or are being closed, is not a position that is getting smaller. In fact, it's getting bigger in direct proportion to that. In addition, part of Richard Reed's role is to be our diocesan historiographer, to gather and hold some of the stories and the history of our diocese. By increasing this position by a total of $3,000, we expand our capacity to have him do archival work for us, and also provide some space in that small budget for some of the historiography work that we know is actually happening in various ministry areas and is necessary as we continue to want to hold not only the records, but the stories and the events and the narratives around the work that we are doing together. So I think that's a great stage there, expanding the role of archivist slightly to allow for this new situation. Our benefits administrator is Pat Hawkins. She is an excellent benefits administrator. She has highly specialized knowledge, and the work that she does isn't just for the diocese or diocesan staff. It's actually for every congregation in the diocese, for both clergy and lay staff. She assists in figuring out pension and benefits and working with CPG and making sure people's medical insurance is up to date. She's a key part of our letter of agreement conversations, and she's a highly specialized position that we do need. Every diocese has someone charged with this work because it's so important for us as a diocese, and for our congregations and our clergy and lay leaders. We recognized earlier this year that Pat's compensation level wasn't quite where it should be, so we did increase that, but not a huge amount, but just to get her in line with where she should be, given the level of specialized knowledge that she has. And so in this case, not only keeping her in doing the good work she's doing and supporting her with that, but also making sure that we do provide a small cost of living increase, because that position is so valued for us, and it's so important that we have that person on our staff. Our caretaker is John Conti. He is the only member of the diocesan staff that is hourly. It is a part-time position. It has been expanding over the years for a couple of reasons. Number one, as Phyllis mentioned earlier, our building is getting older, and that means that there's more, not less, to do at diocesan house. And as we changed how we have been present in that space with COVID, that actually means a heavier burden has fallen on the caretaker. While others are less present in that space, he has had to be additionally present to catch things and make sure that nothing goes too terribly wrong. He's our first pass when things break or they don't work, and he's a tremendous resource for hospitality and for connection. We discovered turns out that a couple of years ago, the hours he was working increased, and he really should be receiving more benefits than he actually had been. So that's something that's reflected in a more realistic look at this year's budget. And he was, we think, underpaid for the value he brings to the position. So that was a position that we felt we wanted to make sure we supported as we could, and have expanded his hours for next year. But here is the marvelous thing that we discovered this fall. John, whose position is part-time, in his spare time, he owns and runs a catering business. As part of his work for us at his diocesan hourly rate, and with the ability to purchase the food that is needed for events, he has taken on a lot of our our catering needs for the things that we offer. As one example, one week, about early October, John provided lunch for the clergy gathering of about 80 people, sandwiches and salads and cookies and things like that. I see a note from Caroline Carson in the chat that it was terrific and delicious. It actually was appropriately. We had for the first time, really the ability to give people genuinely gluten-free food. On the Saturday, John also provided a hot meal for our Hispanic Vocations Conference, which also had 80 people at it. The total cost for 2 lunches for 80 people per person was just over $600. If we had done that with like catering boxes from Panera, which was our previous pattern, we would have spent thousands of dollars. We think he's saved us. He's half to a third of the cost in having John do that work. So John is a valued member of the staff, and he's doing some important things. It does reflect a slight increase in our budget there in order to have him do that, but it is well worth it. He's also taken on a few of the buildings and grounds tasks that, with a shift in the office staff, as we might recall, 3 folks retired when Bishop Stokes retired, and when we replaced them with 2. Which is why this line above says administrative assistant on the left-hand side, and there is no administrative assistant position in the new 2024 as the right-hand column. That was Mary Ann Clisham's position. It was not, we did not rehire for that position, so there's some savings from that. But again, John Conte, our caretaker, has stepped into some of the work that needed to be done, and so that's been a good rebalancing within the staff. The controller and staff accountant are 2 members of Phyllis's finance team, and they're the folks who work to make sure that our bills get paid and that checks get written for people who need things done. They handle a lot of the in-house financial matters, and as you know, we don't have an especially large budget, but we do also look after funds and oversee trust accounts for the diocese and for congregations, and so they're kind of the core key part of Phyllis's finance and administration team at Diocesan House. That's Tanya and Ramez, and you may have encountered either of them. We're still working on some restructuring within that department, and there'll be more about that when we get further up this chart. So there is a bit of reorganizing going on, but it's increasingly streamlined and clear, and folks are increasingly able to get the responses they need out of our finance office. The line above that, there's 2 lines above, it says Canon for Communications is our current position. One of the things I'm aware of is that when I look at our staff, we haven't previously had really clear levels and bands. So a canon position or a missioner position, you couldn't always tell what the compensation or the expectations would be based on the title. With this, what we're looking at for communications is moving from having a canon for communications, whose position was compensated more similarly to our missioner positions, to a missioner for evangelism and social media, as a full-time position that focuses on sharing the good news, sharing our story, the work of getting the word out about who we are and what we do and why we do it. We haven't talked a lot about evangelism, but it's part of how we are to be present in the world as Christians. And so having someone who can do that on behalf of the diocese and support our congregations and communities and leaders, both clergy and lay, in that work is important. And to allow that position to focus on the evangelism part, on the sharing of good news. That position will be supported by a half-time missioner for communications technology. By dividing the 2 positions out, we get the sort of soft skills in one of evangelism together with the technical abilities around website management, Zoom meeting protocol and registration, those types of things that we're managing to get them done, but I think it's a lot to ask of one person. And by dividing this into 1.5 people, we have the capacity to really strengthen our communications offerings to the diocese. I have started working with a very small group on communications priorities for the diocese. We're expanding that conversation in the weeks ahead, and there'll be an opportunity for folks to weigh in on their thoughts and how we can, as a diocese, develop a clear policy and practices to move forward with effective communications and evangelism for today. But these 2 positions, one full-time, one half-time, will support that. The missioner for communications technology position should also be a helpful support for our school for ministry, our youth conveners as needed, and the various other staff positions that do work in the area of sort of the technical communications. I think even of the Clergy Day earlier this month, where we did need, communication support for that. So there's a lot of work there, and it'll be good to have a couple of people who have some skill in that area. When I arrived, we had 2 youth conveners. They were charged with that responsibility just before COVID began, and the initial vision was a great one in the days before COVID. It was that our conveners would not be so much active missioners as they would be people who brought folks together to do the work of youth ministry that were already doing the work of youth ministry. COVID has been hard. It has been especially challenging for youth ministry and for formation ministries. It's hard to get young people back to participation in the same way. I believe that at this point, we need a more active role from our youth staff. And so I have appointed Claire Gutwine, our youth missioner. She started actually October 1st. That combined the 2 youth convener positions into one, and it was essentially budget neutral because we were able to combine 2 sort of quarter time-ish, but not really clearly defined positions into one half-time youth missioner position. I think we're already seeing the benefits of that. She's made connections in a variety of places, and it's I think this is congregations and lay leaders and clergy and families and young people will find that they have greater access to support for ministry with and for youth through our new structure. And as I said, it is essentially budget neutral. I say essentially because there was a small increase in benefits that were required with a half-time position, but it is in the neighborhood of $1,000 or so. It's not more than that. We have two folks currently serving at canon level positions for multicultural ministries. One is our canon missioner to historic Black churches that we currently have an interim in that role. That is Deacon Clive Sang. The other is our canon missioner for Hispanic congregations, and that is Canon Ramon Ubiera. Both of those positions could use some support. The Hispanic congregations position has historically had an administrator, a Hispanic administrator, that was funded through the trustees. That provides support for bilingual documents, for service bulletins. Some of those, the congregations that our Hispanic missioner supports haven't been able to, don't have the ability to produce the bulletins for a service, or there are other places where, because of the language challenges and the barriers there, having an administrator has made that position easier. So while that was funded by the trustees to make the work of the for Hispanic ministries more accessible and available, we believe it should be part of our diocesan budget, and that this position should be included within the listing as support for our canon for Hispanic ministries. We are planning to begin a hiring process probably early in the new year for a new permanent canon for Black ministries. The reason we're going to take a little time and do that hiring process in the new year rather than right away is because we want to make sure that we have the folks from the various communities and congregations and ministry groups as part of the search process and as part of the process of developing the position description more clearly for a permanent position to go forward. But this is a role that should be able to support and equip our congregations of African descent, lift up the ministry of folks of African descent, and help us as a diocese to respond strategically and creatively to our call to do justice and to engage in this work faithfully in the years ahead. This position should be supported, I think, by a quarter-time missioner for Black ministries. That quarter-time support would be an on-the-ground. It's an ideal position for someone who has the time and the connections and already knows our congregations, and is someone who can, take a warden out to lunch and have a conversation about what's going on. Turn up on a Sunday in a congregation that has some opportunity or challenge. Some of our congregations of African descent are among our most active in children's and youth ministry. The different ministry, the Coalition for Black Ministries, does work with many of the congregations of African descent to provide some summer vacation Bible school and such. So having a missioner for Black ministries as well as the canon for Black ministries in those positions sort of allows us double support in some ways in places where work is happening and it's clearly needed. One other word about the title. Canon missioner is the title we've been using. I think we should just call them canons. Canon is a title that is a little more easy to understand. It sounds a little bit like it's at a higher level than canon missioner, which is kind of a modified title. But I think we should, for those in the full-time positions at that level, I think they really are canons. So I want to make the title change reflect that. It also creates clarity within the structure. So the missioner for Black ministries would report to the canon for Black ministries, and it creates this opportunity there to see the structure and the way the diocese is working in this area. We have a third position in this area, as well as the Black ministries and the Hispanic ministries, which is the Haitian ministries. We have someone in our diocese currently serving as a missioner for Haitian ministries. This position has been funded in a variety of ways, including diocesan grants and also grants from the national church. But they are doing amazing work in a variety of different places across our diocese, while also supporting one of our congregations as an associate priest. So I'd like to have the missioner for Haitian ministries be brought into the budget as a position that we would fund appropriately through it's similar funding that already exists. The grant is there, but have it be reflected as part of our staff budget, both in order to support them in their work. I think that creates an opportunity for them to be heard more widely and seen, the work that they're doing to be seen and lifted up, but also it allows us to be clear about how we are supporting a variety of different ministries in our diocese. There's growth in many of these communities, and finding ways to lift that up and celebrate it is really important. So I like the idea of really strengthening our multicultural ministry offerings through this. As we move towards the last few positions on our list, I've talked before about the School for Ministry. The School for Ministry position, currently the Reverend Jen Bishop is the person who serves as executive director for the School for Ministry, or as director of the School for Ministry. She really started the School for Ministry in response to Bishop Stokes's invitation and request that we create a way to organize the way we were hoping to form people for ordained vocations in our diocese. And she's done great work in building this up to a real place of strength. She is also contemplating stepping back and looking at sort of healthy leadership transition. And I see ways that this position could be offered more widely. The work of the School for Ministry could be offered more widely in the diocese. Right now, it focuses primarily on forming people for ministry, most of which is ordained ministry. But there are other ways that we can form and engage people for ministry at all ages and stages. And there are other adult formation, Christian education offerings that the School for Ministry could have a key role in facilitating. One example is confirmation classes. Most people are formed in their congregation for confirmation. But if a congregation doesn't have a priest who's resident, or if they're dependent on regular supply clergy or retired clergy who come in and help on Sundays, then it can be really hard to organize around a confirmation class or a reception for an adult coming to us from another faith tradition, or simply confirmation for an adult who hasn't been confirmed before. The School for Ministry is one place where we could house that kind of work and offer it locally to support congregations, to support individuals, to strengthen leaders across the diocese. So I see the potential for expanding the School for Ministry as tremendous, moving it into the area of formation, adult Christian formation, and including things like clergy continuing formation and the clergy conference and other areas where we focus on education for people at every stage of their Christian journey. And so expanding that, taking the position of director for the School for Ministry and recognizing that we have always had staff who have had some responsibility for formation, among other things, in their portfolio of responsibilities. Bringing this together into one canon for formation and vocations a canon position, having a conversation around how we can have someone whose specific role on my staff is to be a support to congregations, to clergy, to lay leaders, and to every member of the diocese in terms of forming and equipping for ministry and assisting us to support people in all the vocations, including vocations to lay leadership. I think this is a great new position. In fact, we're advertising it right now. And I think it will be a real strength for us to have this in one place. I see a note in the chat. How about EFM? Absolutely. EFM is a great resource for formation and ministry. It is something that a canon for formation could certainly support. We do support it as a diocese. And in fact, that brings me to the Missioner for Lifelong Christian Formation, because it is our lifelong Christian formation budget that actually supports EFM, our diocesan membership for EFM. In addition to a canon for formation and vocations, I'd like for us to have a quarter-time missioner for lifelong Christian formation. That's a very small position, but it gives us the ability to put some real time and dedication and gifts and skills to the work of children's formation and intergenerational formation. The missioner for lifelong Christian formation, as well as the youth missioner, would both report to the canon for formation. I think this just really helps us to consolidate what we offer in terms of learning opportunities, and I think it's a good next step. So I'm hopeful that should these positions and this area of work is not something that we haven't had responsibility for or done before. We're just lifting it up in a little different way and assigning the responsibility there. So the funding for this position comes from a couple of places. It comes from some of the positions that aren't continuing, and we'll talk about a bit more about that in a moment. And it comes from the School for Ministry funding that, as Jen Bishop moves towards stepping away from that role, will become available for the canon for formation to step into that role and to provide that work of leadership and direction for the School for Ministry as well. One of the positions that we had this year was the canon for congregational development and mission, which was Canon Rob Drosty's position. It was an executive level staff position, and it was focused. I think it was the work of that position focused primarily in recent years on coaching support and on initiatives to look at support for clergy and lay leaders across the diocese, using a couple of specific models. What we've really needed is a position that is congregational support on the ground level, not an executive level position on the bishop's staff, but someone who can be in the congregations quickly, can deal with situations of conflict or needs to prioritize or opportunities, can be there when there's an unexpected change of some kind or a matter that requires a response. The kind of person who can be just an advocate and a support, a pastoral presence for congregations and for clergy and lay leaders and vestries, someone to step in with the vestry and walk them through roles and responsibilities, that kind of on the ground, sort of the bread and butter of congregational support. So the canon for congregational development and mission position is becoming a different level canon for congregations position. And that allows us to move that work forward without necessarily without having someone at the executive staff level, but still having someone with skills and gifts and real commitment to our congregations and our leaders. I think that's a great step. It'll get us some on-the-ground help in places where folks really have need of it. Our CFO position, we recognized this summer that position, which started, it started less than a year before that, we had some hopes about some responsibilities and tasks that might be undertaken, but it really hadn't, the position itself hadn't quite managed to actualize that. We couldn't quite get the arrangements to work as clearly as we might. It was a pretty expensive position as well, because the person in the role had some very specialized skill sets that in hindsight we probably didn't need on the bishop's staff. I think Phyllis could probably speak to that at some point, but that position, we made the decision that with some restructuring in the finance and administration area, we could eliminate that position while still maintaining the services and the support that congregations need from us, and also while recognizing the challenges of our budget. So that position will not be continued. Meanwhile, the chief operating officer position is one that is I'm going to change the title on that one from Chief Operating Officer and Acting Chief Financial Officer to Canon to the Ordinary for Administration and Finance. We're also hiring a permanent Canon to the Ordinary position, and that is the Canon to the Ordinary for Mission. The reason that these two positions are both Canon to the Ordinary is it allows us to create an organizational structure. You'll be able to see sort of the org chart where the areas kind of line up together, and you'll be able to see more neatly how the different roles and responsibilities equate with one another, and who reports to whom and how that structure works. I think this creates for us a greater clarity in our structure. It also allows us to see the mission and purpose of the diocese at work at all levels, and it allows for us to bring in a Canon to the Ordinary for Mission to work as a partner with our Canon to the Ordinary for Administration and Finance to create some clear structures and support for the diocese and for me. I think this is the staffing structure that will allow me to do the work that is in front of me for the next few years. That I think this equips me to serve as the bishop that as a diocese we need together. And I think that this is a way that we're going to see our congregations are going to find that there's a lot more space for responses from diocesan staff, that it's easier to see who you reach out to for what, and what you might want to know, or how connections might happen. There's a question about who will be in charge of working with congregations in transition. That role remains with the Canon to the Ordinary for Mission. That's the kind of work that we want someone at that level to have access to and be responsible for. So thank you, Phyllis, for sharing this. If you want to take the screen share away, I'm happy to answer other questions folks might have outside of the chat.
I did see one pop up in the chat. Who will be in charge of working with congregations in transition?
Yeah, I just answered that, I think.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
I'm really thrilled with this structure. It feels like it meets the needs of the diocese while also diminishing our staffing costs by, on an apples to apples level by 112 or 113,000. Because of the cost of living increase that we're budgeting for staff, that takes away some of the decrease, but we're still coming in at 52,000 less than last year, or than 2023 for our staffing budget for next year, while expanding the support that's offered to our congregations and equipping our various ministries, our clergy, our lay leaders in new ways. I think this is about as good a way forward as I could have dreamed of. So. It almost feels too good to be true, doesn't it? I can get more staffing, give more services, and also we're saving $52,000 outright. But it's true. When we look at the numbers and what's possible, it really does seem like that God has given us a possibility, and it's exciting. We're currently advertising for three of the three positions: the Canon to the Ordinary for Mission, the Canon for Congregations, and the Canon for Formation and Vocations. And we're getting good responses. We've got some really interesting folks have applied. We've got really great possibilities, and I'm feeling pretty optimistic about everything. So.
Alrighty, well, with that, then I'm not seeing anything else coming up right now. So while people are perhaps still thinking through this and formulating if they do have other questions, I'm going to go ahead back to the budget screen just so that we can sort of scroll through quickly what this looks like in terms of the budget. And so this whole section that we skipped over when Jonathan was doing his run through before it shows you how what Bishop French just took us through in terms of structure and vision translates into numbers on the budget. So you'll see in some cases here we have, for example, the bishop's position does have the cost of living adjustment included in it. So that's why you see that there's a bit of a an increase there from what it would have been otherwise been in 2024.
And one thing in that
Similarly,
area too is that, just remember last year we had an overlap of about 3 months between Bishop Stokes and Bishop French. So we did achieve some savings by not having that overlap this year too.
right.
So that
So,
contributes to the reduced staff costs.
yes, it does. Well, it does. But what we were actually comparing when we did that staffing summary before, and the numbers that Bishop French and I have been working with are actually comparisons between what we anticipated for 2024 in the preliminary budget versus what the revised budget actually looks like. Because we knew that there was some, overlap in the some of the positions on the 2023 budget, which we knew wouldn't repeat. So the number that you were seeing on the schedule and the number that Bishop French was talking about were comparisons between this 2024 preliminary and the 2024 revised. So we could tell how much we actually saved just by the realignment and the restructuring.
Yeah. And I was just referring to 2023 to 2024, like where that
Right.
total $600,000 savings came in, is that some of it is that staff cost
That's true.
went down from 2023 to 24,
Yes. Yep.
in addition to the restructuring that took place.
Yep. Thank you for pointing that out. And so we have, some of the, as I mentioned, some of the positions here where we have increases. Some of them were just setting the salary levels at the levels that we really thought that they should be for the level of position that we were talking about, whether it was a canon to the ordinary or a canon position or a mission position. And then as we move through here, we start to see some of the places where, the chief financial officer's position now is no longer budgeted for. So that part goes away. The canon for congregations was not a position that we budgeted for last year, but now we are budgeting for it. And then, on down the line, you can just sort of see how this all translates into the numbers that we implemented in taking a look at the compensation levels that we thought were appropriate for the positions. And so that continues all the way down through the separately stated congregational staff positions, and then into our group staff positions down in the bottom, along with the benefits that go along with them. And so that is, that's basically a summary of how all of that translates into the budget itself, in case you happen to want to take a look at that. So,
Phyllis, I see one question in the chat that I'd like to address.
I was just going to go there. Okay, go ahead.
Firing existing staff is very difficult. Hiring is less fraught emotionally. Yes, I agree. Are we sure we want to be hiring so many part-time staff now? We're not hiring any, I'm not aware of us hiring any part-time staff at this point, with one small exception, which is the 3 canon positions are full-time. They're all full-time positions. The hiring for the full-time canon for Black ministries in the new year will be a full-time position. The quarter-time position for lifelong formation is one that we are already aware of how that might be filled appropriately in recognition of, and with someone who we know happens to be available for quarter time but would not be available for more. Our youth convener position is the right size position for someone right now, given the other circumstances of their life. So we're not really looking, even as we look at bringing on missioners for various ministries, we're talking more about folks who are really looking for part-time work. We're not talking about hiring processes to bring people on for part-time work. I agree that's challenging to do, and it is hard to find the right person. But sometimes in this work, you find the person who's already doing some of it already and has interest in sharing their gifts and would like a more formal arrangement.
I'll take the next question in the chat and just say that the budget spreadsheet and the table as well as recordings of the hearings themselves, will be posted up on the website, and as soon as possible after Steve Welch returns from vacation tomorrow. He's actually traveling home today, so this will be one of the first things that we'll have him working on to make sure that that's posted. All of it's posted on the website, and we do have the registration links from all of the pre-convention hearings that we've done so far, so we can also do a directed mailing to all of you to give you those links as well, and let you know that they're posted. The next question in the chat that I see is the purpose of the December convention just to approve this new budget? Yes.
My hope is that the December convention is going to be one at the end of which people will say that convention could have been an email. It can't because we have to vote. My hope is that if we do this work right, we actually, by the time December happens, it is not going to be a complex conversation. There will be more conversations in March where we are doing a few other things that will move us in a few directions. But this really is, it is not a placeholder budget per se. It is a budget that diminishes our financial challenges while also creating a stable platform for us to begin to develop into what's next. Yeah.
Are there any other questions that anybody has?
What do y'all think? Thumbs up, thumbs down, undecided? Okay. I'm so thrilled that we have managed some significant decreases in our spending. And even without that national church relief, $300,000 on that is a pretty significant win, while also expanding what we're offering to people. I think it's good. But I'm always open to hearing other areas where we could do better. I'm sure there are lots, but it's a start, and it's not a bad way to go forward at this point, I think. And we've had great people working on it. And we continue to, the Board of Missions folks meet, I think it's tomorrow evening. And we've got still more to do in this, but we're, I think, headed where God would have us go. So thank you all for being part of it.
Right. Well, thanks everybody again for your attendance, for your attention. Oh, we got one. Art Peterson, go ahead.
I know this might be a little off to ask, but I was wondering if which one of those positions Phyllis is going to fill when we're done, when this is done.
We'll just keep Phyllis Phyllis is going to be our canon to the ordinary for finance and administration. So we shift away from chief operating officer, acting chief financial officer, chief of staff, and create, I like the title. It's more missional. I like the way it lines up with canons to the ordinary for mission.
I was hoping that was the one she was going to be filling, but as I thought about it, but yes.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for your time this afternoon. Certainly appreciate any additional input you might have as we finalize the process over the next couple of weeks.
Yep, we will at this point in time be taking a little bit of a pre-convention hearing break until right around, I guess it's November 17th will be our next one, which is in person.
I think it's the 18th. It's Saturday the 18th.
Yeah, Saturday the 18th in person. And then I think we have one on Sunday the 19th as our last virtual one. So if there are obviously any questions or concerns that you have as you think further about this, or perhaps, take a look at the document when it's posted or review a recording, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to, again, the more that we can work towards having the December 9th special convention go very quickly and smoothly, the happier all of us are going to be. So I appreciate that.
Thanks.
So, Bishop,
but we really do want feedback. My hope is that it will go smoothly because we've solicited feedback and been open to it as we go forward, not because we want to shut down the conversation at all. I think it's really important that we have the conversation.
Bishop, would you like to close us out in prayer?
Well, thank you. Oh, before I close us out in prayer, though, you mentioned there's a bit of a gap before the next meeting, and the next one is in person. The next one is in person because we're doing our diocesan gathering on the 17th, the evening of the 17th, and the morning of the 18th. And we've got a guest speaker coming in. We've got some interesting opportunities for worship, conversation with me, conversation with one another, and it's free. So please sign up for that, and then feel free to stay through for the in-person budget pre-convention budget conversation that will take place at the cathedral on the 18th. It's kind of late here in England, and I'm a little bit jet lagged. So instead of extemporaneous prayer, I'm going to use an abridged version of the prayer from the BCP for a church convention or meeting. Right to. Let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, source of all wisdom and understanding, be present with us as we take counsel for the renewal and mission of your church. Teach us in all things to seek first your honor and glory. Guide us to perceive what is right, and grant us both the courage to pursue it and the grace to accomplish it. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Is there a deacon who wants to give us a dismissal?
Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Be to God.
And thank you, Gail. Good night, everyone, or good afternoon, everyone.
Yes. Enjoy your time in Canterbury. It's beautiful there.
Thank you. Blessings.
Blessings.